So now we've got this data for muscular dystrophy, the different types, and we want to know, well, how could we display that data? Well, one way to display it would be with a bar graph. So your categories are the variables that are represented by the bars, and then the height of each bar is going to equal, your height here equals the class frequency. So here's an example of a bar graph for that muscular dystrophy data. So we had DMD had a frequency of 13, so our vertical scale here is frequency, goes from 0 to 14. 13 is the highest frequency. LGMD had frequency of 6, the CMD 3, and then the Becker 2. So we've got type of muscular dystrophy on the horizontal, categories here, and then frequency on the vertical. We could also use a bar graph for relative frequency. So this would be a relative frequency bar graph for the data. So the only difference here is that the heights of the bars are the percentage or the proportion of the data instead of the raw numbers. So relative frequency on the vertical, horizontal are the same. That's one way to display data. Another way would be with a pie chart, and that's where categories of the variable are represented by the slices of pie. And your slice here is proportional to the relative frequency. So here's an example of this data in a pie chart, parts of the whole here. So 54%, we can see our key over here, DMD. LGMD was our 25% there, CMD was 13%, and BMD 8%. So parts of a whole, circle graph is a good choice. And then another possibility here is a Pareto diagram. And this is a bar graph here where your categories here are arranged in descending order. So your categories are in descending order. And then it's got a line graph for cumulative relative frequency that's overlaid. So here's what a Pareto diagram looks like. So here's our bar graph of frequency, and it's in decreasing order. And then overlay, this is your cumulative relative frequency from the table in the first part of the example. So cumulative relative is the line, and then this is just frequency for the bars. You could also do, I've seen this also done with relative frequency on the bars, as opposed to just frequency. So that's 3 different ways that we could display this data.